Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea again reports more than 400 cases of COVID-19, many of them from an unauthorized missionary school. The authorities have delayed announcing possible changes to the distancing rules. Data show the pandemic caused South Korea's overall industrial production to decline last year for the first time since records were first kept 20 years ago. And record-high operating profits last year for tech giant LG Electronics. Chipmaker SK Hynix enjoying a bumper year too, with profits up more than 84%. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has again reported more than 400 cases of COVID-19. The figure is back up from where it was a few days ago, in large part because of an outbreak linked to unregistered missionary schools. The health authorities were going to announce changes to the social distancing rules today, but they said they'll need more time to monitor the situation. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
South Korea recorded 469 COVID-19 cases on Friday. Of the new cases, 445 were locally transmitted, most of which were in the capital region. 24 were from overseas. Cases are popping up nationwide, especially due to cluster infections related to schools run by the IM religious missionary group. Health authorities have tested 40 facilities in 11 cities and provinces nationwide, and 340 people from those facilities were confirmed with the virus in places like Daejeon, Gwangju, and Ulsan. Aside from that, cases have sprouted from a taekwondo facility in Andong, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province and a chicken processing company in Chungju, Chungcheongbuk-do Province. As the Lunar New Year holiday is approaching, which could lead to the spread of the virus if measures are relaxed, it's yet to be seen whether the health authorities will ease the current social distancing measures in their announcement set for the weekend.
The slowly falling number of cases has started to go up this week. We're in a state of tension and monitoring the situation.
At the moment, there are around 240 severely ill patients, and with 13 additional fatalities, the death toll is close to 1,400. The total number of cases has now surpassed the 77,000 mark. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
The U.S. biotech firm Novavax has announced an efficacy rate for its COVID-19 vaccine of 89.3%. The company said Thursday that this rate was achieved in 3 clinical trials conducted on 15,000 people in the UK. It also said the vaccine was almost 86% effective against the UK variant of the virus. But a separate trial found an efficacy rate of less than 50% against the variant from South Africa. In other news, the Pentagon has emphasized the importance of maintaining the readiness of U.S. troops in South Korea by engaging in joint military exercises. There have been questions about whether joint drills can be done this year, given the COVID-19 situation, and considering North Korea's possible response to them. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, in a briefing on Thursday, said U.S. Defense Minister Lloyd Austin remains committed to maintaining the readiness of American troops in South Korea through military exercises. Kirby highlighted the importance of troop readiness amid North Korea's continued pursuit of new advanced weapons. He said there is no place that is more important than on the Korean peninsula in the value of training and exercises to keep forces ready. His statement comes after questions have been raised on whether the South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises could be carried out this year. The exercise planned for last March was postponed, while the one carried out last August was shortened due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was conducted using computer simulation exercises that didn't mobilize troops and weaponry. Also recently, Seoul has said the two Koreas can discuss whether to postpone or cancel the joint exercises via an inter-Korean joint committee, first mentioned by President Moon Jae-in earlier this month in response to North Korea's continued opposition to holding the drills. Defense Minister Seok said earlier this week that the military is preparing for the exercises as planned in case there's no progress in inducing a response from North Korea to discuss the matter.
The combined exercise in the first half of this year is a computer-simulated command post exercise without outdoor drills. It is a regular program and for defense purposes. We are closely discussing how to conduct it in detail with the U.S.
The minister had also vowed to make significant progress in the envisioned transfer of operational control from Washington to Seoul during his term, which requires going through the joint exercises in their entirety. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Last year, South Korea's overall industrial output fell for the first time since the figure was first compiled 20 years ago. The decline was led by the service sector, which has been dealt a huge blow by the pandemic. Related was a decline in consumption, the first yearly drop in almost as long. Banjir has more.
South Korea's industrial output last year edged down 0.8% compared to the previous year, due to the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Statistics Korea on Friday, this is the first year that overall industrial output has fallen since the data was first compiled in 2000. Service production dropped 2%, mainly because the travel industry, restaurants, and sports facilities were hit hard by the outbreak. But mining and manufacturing industries performed slightly better, up 0.4%, helped by semiconductors.
As for the mining and manufacturing industries, exports increased in the second half of last year, and production of semiconductors and mechanical equipment did especially well.
Facility investment last year was up by 6%, but consumption was down by 0.2% on year amid the pandemic, the largest drop in 17 years, as the consumption rate rarely falls. But for this year, one industry watcher had a positive outlook.
Car production dropped a lot last year because many of Korea's large trading partners struggled with the economic fallout from the pandemic. But as the COVID-19 situation is projected to improve this year, the industrial output will probably show growth in 2021.
The month of December last year did show some signs of economic recovery, as the industrial output, consumption, and investment all went up on month. Industrial output went up 0.5% thanks to mining and manufacturing, even though the figures for services and construction fell. Retail sales edged up slightly and facility investment went up 0.9%, mainly due to increase in exports. Ji, Arirang News.
The South Korean tech giant LG Electronics has posted its biggest ever operating profit and sales for last year. LG says its operating profit in 2020 came to about $2.8 billion. That's a jump of roughly 31% compared to the year before. And it's also the first time operating profit has exceeded 3 trillion won. Sales were also the best they've ever been at around $56 billion. Analysts say it was largely thanks to solid global sales of TVs and home appliances as consumers spent what they had held back in the pandemic. Meanwhile, South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix saw its operating profit increase by more than 84% on year in 2020, thanks to the rise in demand for semiconductors. Operating profit came to some $4.5 billion. Wall Street watchers have been transfixed this week by the small investors who've used social media to bring short-selling hedge funds to their knees, most notably buying shares of GameStop. In South Korea, though, short-selling is not allowed, so this is not something likely to happen here. Kim Sung-min reports.
Connected through social media, once weak retail investors have turned into an army able to influence the stock market and even crash a billion-dollar hedge fund. At-home retail investors in the U.S. banded together in the Wall Street Bets Reddit chat room and bought shares of struggling video game chain GameStop. They pushed shares higher after noticing that short-selling hedge funds had bet too much on the company's stock price falling. The small investors pushed GameStop's share price up so much that the company's value increased from $2 billion to over $24 billion in just a few days. That was until brokers like Robinhood restricted trading on the stock, citing market volatility, which caused GameStop to close down more than 40% on Thursday.
You can't buy the stock anymore. You can only sell it, and they're trying to make people scared so that they can cover their shorts. And we're out here protesting that because that's bull.
The trading restrictions didn't just lead to online fury, as the U.S. House Financial Services and Senate Banking Committees said on Thursday local time that they will hold hearings over apps such as Robinhood suspending trading of GameStop. The US isn't the only country to see a new generation of small retail investors with increasing power in the market. South Korean retail investors are also gathering in online public chat rooms on social media platforms like KakaoTalk and taking group action. But local stock trading laws mean we're unlikely to see an incident in South Korea similar to GameStop.
Retail investors in South Korea could be easily swayed by KakaoTalk online boards, but what's different from GameStop is that short stock selling is restricted, so taking revenge on institutions or hedge funds cannot happen.
Short selling, the act of selling stocks that you don't yet own, then buying them at a later date when you hope they have fallen in price, is currently banned in South Korea. The government prohibited short selling to lower market volatility, but some institutional investors want the ban overturned, and the government is looking into allowing short selling perhaps as early as June. Meanwhile, on Friday, South Korea's benchmark Kospi closed below the 3,000 mark for the first time in 16 days as the foreign investors sold off stocks in bulk. The Kospi was down 3.3% to close at 2,976. 김성민, Arirang News.
South Korea's Parcel Delivery Drivers Union has called off a strike that was due to start today, voting instead to approve a three-way agreement with the government and the top three logistics companies. The strike was announced earlier this week over poor conditions and overwork that reports say have led to several deaths. Specifically, the drivers complained that they had to sort parcels themselves and were not paid for it. Today's agreement calls for the logistics companies to deploy more workers to these tasks by next Thursday, with the government to monitor the situation. They also agreed to pay more than the minimum wage when there's no choice but to have drivers sort parcels. Next month, South Korea will celebrate one of its biggest holidays, the Lunar New Year. And ahead of that, the city of Seoul is promoting big discounts offered by merchants at traditional markets. At 139 markets in Seoul, customers can get up to 50% off on items like fish, meat, produce, and other things needed for New Year family rituals. One thing people will be looking to buy is yeonggwanggulbi, a type of dried fish, and it'll be sold at wholesale prices. The discounts start today and run through February 10th. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon, and thanks for coming on.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street closed higher overnight, bouncing back somewhat from the big decline the session before, and especially strong recovery in the financials and the materials sectors, which are considered to benefit more from an economic recovery. Technology and telecommunications shares doing well too. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, U.S. market closed higher on yesterday. The Dow Jones was up about 1%, S&P also up about 1%, NASDAQ was up 0.5%, and small cap was slightly up by 0.3%. However, though, from the intraday highs, actually it has come down quite a bit, by almost 1 percentage point. The reason for that is because the concern about the economic recovery might be not coming at the full speed as hopefully expected. If you look at the fourth quarter numbers that came out for the GDP of U.S., U.S. economy expanded annualized 4% in the fourth quarter, slowing from 33.4% expansion in third quarter, as the continued rise in the COVID-19 cases has impacted quite negatively. If you look at the numbers of expectation, it was 4.3%, and it came in at much shorter than that. Because of that, I think that people are concerned about the overall economic conditions of U.S., and that is trickling to most of the other economies in the world. If you look at the European market right now, it is down somewhere around 1.5% plus, and the U.S. futures market also is down somewhere between 1 to 1.5%. And obviously, that is resulting into most of the other Asian markets actually being negatively affected. Clearly, there's a concern about the economic recovery, the pace of it, despite all the boosting measures that are coming through from the U.S. as well as Europe and all the global governments.
Yeah, and speaking of the Asian markets, here in Korea, the Kospi was down by more than 3%. The Kosdaq down by even more. Foreign investors are selling off in a big way. Mr. Yu, we're going to have to leave it there for today. We're up against the clock. So we'll talk about the markets again early next week. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.